Eagles destroyed the Kansas City Chiefs to become Super Bowl champions. The question is, are the Eagles this good, or did the Chiefs really not belong to be in the Super Bowl? Now the question in the NFL comes, not only which teams will not be in the playoffs next year that we're in this year, but which stars are going to be on which teams, and we're going to tell you what we think. But now that the Super Bowl's over, a championship is still on the horizon with the Daytona 500 happening this Sunday. And we are going to have Dan Marquetta from Let's Talk NASCAR tell us all about it. That and more coming up on Sports Talk with Dad right now. Welcome back to another amazing episode of Sports Talk with Dad. As always, my name is Kyle, and I cannot call this Sports Talk with Dad without the man sitting next to me, a man who was alive before cars even existed, my dad, Tim.
Not true. Not true.
Horse and buggy.
Not true. But I have to talk to you about something.
What's that?
So, for everybody, I get a call last night.
Oh, we don't have to tell this story.
From my grandson saying, "Grandpa, can you come over right away?" And I said, "Sure. Is everybody okay? Anybody hurt? You need to see this." So I go over to the house, walk in, and there's a big spider across the TV in the living room. And I, of course, said, "How did that happen?" And I'll let you say how that happened, and I want the real story, not the one you made up to try to make yourself sound good.
I saved a kid's life.
Okay,
That's
nice
what
try.
happened.
So my oldest grandson, Grayson, had a Pokeball in his hand. Kyle, of course, had to knock said Pokeball
There's
out
more
of
to
the
that
hand.
story, but okay.
You knocked it into the TV.
I did. We were playing. He was goofing around. He was holding up like he was going to have a Pokemon come at me. And so I whacked the Pokeball, and it flew into the TV.
And that's different from what I said because
It's not.
so we had to then go and buy a new TV and install it.
I did make you come with me. I didn't know what to buy. I had no idea.
Oh, God. Thank God for Costco.
Yeah, no
And
kidding.
sales.
Did get a nice TV, which is good. It was an old TV and it was due, but man, I felt dumb the rest of the night. I still feel dumb. Like, what a stupid way to break a TV. Like, I've done that to him thousands of times. Things have hit that TV thousands of times, and it's just the thing had a corner on it, and when I hit it, it hit my hand weird and flew, and so dumb.
The boys were laughing real hard about this.
Yeah, everybody was laughing, but man, it's like I literally, it was one of those moments where time kind of just stopped. And I looked at the TV being like, there's no way it's broken right now. There's no way. And then the realization just sits in. And by the time the realization sits in, Grayson's like, "Don't worry, I'm calling Grandpa." I was like, "Don't you call Grandpa." He goes in the other room and calls you. And then I had to explain. Yeah.
He laughed really hard. But, I mean, it was a 10-year-old TV. So, I mean, it's several generations out anyway.
It was definitely, we were talking about getting a new TV anyway. It's just I wasn't expecting to have to go out at 7 o'clock at night and find a brand new TV. Just a dumb dad moment. That's all it was. It was just a dumb moment.
I laughed hard. It was great.
I'm not laughing. I still feel stupid. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure, happy to.
I appreciate it. But
You know
we have something really cool to talk about here, because you will remember when cars first came into place, and you'll remember when racing them first came into place.
I do remember watching Richard Petty in his number 43 car way back in the day. He still holds the record. I think he won like 200 races or something stupid like that.
That's crazy.
It's one of the records that'll never be broken.
Well, we do have the Daytona 500 coming up this weekend, and so we thought who better to have on than Dan Marquetta, who is the producer and co-host of Let's Talk NASCAR. Dan, how you doing?
Really good. Thanks. Fun to join you today.
Hey, happy to have you here.
So, Dan, you and I stumbled across each other at our other jobs, and I heard that all about Let's Talk NASCAR. How long has the show been on the air, and how did it come about?
It's actually been on the air for 40 years. This is our 41st season. The guy that started, his name was Todd Bailing. He just was a race fan and thought he wanted to do some radio. And so he got together and with a couple sponsors, went to a local radio station, put it all together. And I was a listener. I was probably like 15 years old when it started, and I listened every week because I was a big race fan. Well, then when I went to college, we had to write a letter to a media outlet for a project. So I was a mass comm major, and I didn't to look for a show. I picked one I thought that would write me back. I thought if I wrote to a big station, it probably wouldn't go anywhere. But this guy doing this racing show that I listened every week, maybe he'd give me a call. So I wrote him, and he did. He called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to come on and just help out? I mean, you can sit around and see how it goes." So I went to the station. I answered phones, and then after doing that for a couple of weeks, the program director from the radio station called me and said, "Hey, I understand you're coming in. Do you want to do some shifts, like some board operator shifts? It has to be over like holidays, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and all that." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. That'd be kind of cool to do that." So I did that during the off season that year. And then the next year when it came along, that program director moved to a TV role. And the guy that took her spot was the guy that was doing the Sunday morning shift. And I was coming in to help out with this racing show. So he said, "Well, hey, this shift is open. You want to do it? It's Sunday mornings. You like doing the racing stuff. You can do the show. You got to come in like at 5 o'clock in the morning and put church and a bunch of other stuff on before the racing stuff. But it can be yours if you want it." So I started doing that. And then after I got out of college, we talked about how maybe we should try to make the show a little bigger. So we kind of syndicated it. And that was in 1993. The show started in 85. I came on in 89. In 93, we syndicated it for a while. And now it's on mostly online. It's on the Big 920, which is, I think it's Fox Sports 920 AM WOKY in Milwaukee. And it's on a bunch of places online like Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, iHeartRadio app, and all that. At one point, we were on 20 radio stations. That's the most we had. So,
well, now we just had the Super Bowl, but this weekend is a Great American Race. And as I told you, Kyle and I aren't real NASCAR fans, but we've got family members who are really into NASCAR. What makes this race, because it's the first race of the year, which is unusual, what makes this one so special?
yeah, it's kind of strange. I mean, this sport starts out with a Super Bowl. We don't end with it. So the first race of the year is probably the biggest one. And a lot of it is just the anticipation of a new season. Everybody's on the same level. You don't really know who's the favorite, and everybody is on the rest all on the track at the same time. So it's not like you're playing like two teams individually. There's 40 cars out there in the race, and each one's got a shot to win. So everybody's all kind of hyped up for that. I think it got so big is because Daytona is kind of the birthplace of NASCAR. That's where everything came about. They had their meetings and pretty much formed the sport, and then they built the speedway. And to get everybody out there, I think it was built to kind of rival Indianapolis. They have like a stock car track. They used to race on a beach way back then, and then they moved to the track, and they had the Daytona 500. And just because of the history, it's like it's a Super Bowl of stock car racing, what they call it. And it's probably one of the races that every driver wants to win, especially if you make it to that level. And I think that's part of it. And we spent the last 3 months doing nothing. We had an off season, and everybody sat around in the winter and they're itching to go racing, go out and do it again. So everybody's kind of excited to get back into it. And what a better way to do it with the biggest event.
Well, and again, not a NASCAR fan, not a race fan to any large extent, but I'll watch Daytona, and I'll watch the Indy 500. Indy used to be the big thing I remember watching, but Daytona and NASCAR is just taken over. What makes it so special, and what makes it so different from these other kinds of racing?
I think a lot of it is the closeness of the competition. I mean, NASCAR cars, they're racing next to each other. They got fenders. They can bang at each other a little bit. Indy cars, you touch wheels and you're gone. You're in the fence, and you can't really do that as much as you can in a NASCAR race. Plus, the cars kind of look like the street cars. They used to be exactly like them. Now they're, inside they're nothing like a street car, but this basic shape is still there. And people do identify with the brands. I mean, you win on Sunday, sell on Monday still comes into effect. And everybody that drives a Ford to the racetrack roots for the Fords. And if you drive a Chevy, you root for the Chevys. And now Toyota's a part of it as well. I think that's a big thing that makes it. The big thing, their biggest popularity thing in NASCAR happened about probably about late 90s. The IndyCar group kind of got into a split. They kind of went off. USAC and ran one way, and then they brought in a cart. They called their organization CART, was Championship Auto Racing Teams, and they were running it for a while. And then the guys that ran the Indy Motor Speedway, was Tony George, decided that he didn't like the way things were going, so he started his own league, which is Indy Racing League, and that split really hurt IndyCar. And NASCAR was there to kind of pounce on that opportunity, and their popularity really rose. IndyCar's coming back around now. It's kind of coming full circle this year. IndyCar is getting back up there, and they're back as kind of where they were, and NASCAR is still as popular as it was. So now you kind of got two strong auto racing groups.
Now, there's teams in NASCAR too, right? And the only reason I know this is because I know Joe Gibbs, former head coach of the Washington Redskins, had a team or still has a team. How does that work?
Well, the owners kind of got together now and wanted to get involved in the sport, and that's what Joe Gibbs did. He formed his team back in 1993. Well, it was one car. Then I think they added a second car. They're up to 4 cars now, and that's the most. They kind of put a cap on that. They don't want one owner owning all the cars in the field. So I think you kind of 4 cars. I think it's actually 3 now. But Joe Gibbs and Rick Hendrick were kind of grandfathered in because they had 4 to start with. But that's kind of where that formed. And then a couple of years ago, they really changed things around on the ownership side of NASCAR. They were always independent contractors. They were never a franchise. It's not like a team in football or baseball or basketball where you own the franchise. It was just you were an independent contractor, and people started complaining that when it was all said and done, you didn't have any value in what you had. There were guys that were in the sport, spent all these years, kind of didn't keep up with the times, and it was time to get out. They had nothing to show for it. So they came up with these charters, they call them, and they're like franchises, but not exactly. If you own a charter, there's 36 of them. If you own a charter, you have a guaranteed spot in every race. You have more prize money, and it's got some value. So if you want to get out, you could sell that to somebody that wants to get in and actually get something for it. I think the last charter sold for like $30-40 million. So they kind of got up in value.
Oh,
That's changed. That really brought the team concept along when those charters came. Because now if you have 4 charters, that's some pretty good value right there of the 36 that are available.
so break that down for me, because this is interesting for somebody that's not a NASCAR fan, just to understand that a little bit more in detail. So you said a charter ensures you get a spot in the race. What does that mean?
Well, because there's so many starting spots in a race. There used to be 43. They cut that down to 40. There's 40 starting spots.
Okay.
There are 36 chartered teams that are guaranteed a spot every race. And that helps with the fans. Your favorite driver, if you're on a charter car, you know that car is going to race. They used to have all 40 cars qualified. The top 40 made it. And if you didn't make in the top 40, you went home too bad. Now with these charters, you have actually a guaranteed spot. And it's changed a lot of the qualifying around for Daytona, because that used to be a race. Everybody showed up. All the cars tried to make the fastest 43 started. Now there's 36 that are guaranteed in there, and that's part of the value of having this charter. They have some open cars. So an entry field this week at Daytona is going to have 45 cars on it, and there 36 are guaranteed in. There's 9 cars that are open cars that have to qualify their way in for 4 spots. So 5 cars technically are going to go home. Now this year, they really kind of confused everything and put another wrench into plans. Helio Castroneves, who's the 4-time Indy 500 winner, has a ride for the Daytona 500. It's the number 91 car. He has made no NASCAR starts in the NASCAR Cup Series, but he's going to try to make this race. They have a new thing this year that if you bring a driver from another series that's really prominent, there's an open exemption provisional available, and they're going to use that for him. So in other words, if he doesn't qualify, he will be the 41st starter, but he will get no points, no money, all the financial stuff that goes with it go away, but you get to start the race. And they did that just to kind of encourage drivers from other series to come and give it a shot. So there could be 41 cars in the race this week, depending on what Helio Castroneves does. If he qualifies in, there's going to be 40 cars.
So we have 36 charters that are paid for. They're in. That's over. But we have 4 spots that we need to qualify for. So from what you were saying, it's the fastest time on the track. So what do? They just race around the track by themselves?
And normally on a normal week, they would do that. They would qualify one car at a time and go by speed, and then that would set your lineup. Daytona is different. Daytona, every car takes a qualifying run, so all 40, 5 cars will get a shot. Only car on the racetrack. They'll line them up by speed. Of that, they set 2 qualifying races on Thursday. This is only for Daytona. They do this differently just because they call it Speed Week, and they kind of want more action for the fans to come watch. There's 2 qualifying races on Thursday. They split the field in half. The first 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, all the odd qualifiers on one race, all the even qualifiers in the next race. And what they'll do is where you finish in that race is where you're going to start. The front row is locked. First 2 cars, the first car and the second car, they're locked on the front row. They'll start in the pole, they'll start in the outside pole. Every other spot is going to be filled through these qualifying races. Should you win the first qualifying race, the odd qualifier, the winner will start 3rd, second place will start 5th, third place will start 7th. And the even will just the opposite way, where the winner of that race will start 4th, second place will start 6th, 8, all the way down. Those open cars that don't have a spot, the 2 fastest open cars from those 2 qualifying races will get a spot. So that's 2 of the 4 spots filled by those 2 top cars in that race. The last 2 spots for the open cars are go back to your qualifying run. So if you are the fastest open car without a charter, and the second fastest, you will get a guaranteed spot because the 2 fastest cars from qualifying, and they'll take 2 from the race. So it'll be weird. You watch these races, and the guys will be racing up front, and you maybe watch the best action might be a battle for 15th or somewhere. These 2 open cars are racing each other. They used to do it. They used to take the top 15 in every race, and everybody. That's how they set the lineup. That changed with the charter system when they have these guaranteed spots. It made it a lot more confusing.
That's fair.
So you've got these charters, and I know there are different cars on the track. Do they work together? Does one team work together at all?
They will, especially at Daytona, because when your cars run nose to tail, they call it the draft. The air goes over both cars, and it actually 2 cars running nose to tail will go a lot faster than 1 car running by themselves. And it all has to do with the air going over the car and kind of pushing on the back and making like a pocket of air around the racetrack. So you'll get these cars will line up they call it a draft. They'll have 4 or 5 cars in a draft that go flying by 1 car by itself, and you'll see a lot of these teams trying to find teammates, or either the same manufacturer or friends, or even on the same team, and they'll hook up together to try to go to the front to kind of get there. And then once they get there, it's kind of all amongst themselves. So you'll see a lot of working together at Daytona. You can't work too much together. Other races, they had an issue last year where one of the final races, there was a Toyota driver trying to get in and a Chevy driver trying to get the last spot for the championship 4, and the Chevy cars that were ahead of them kind of ran side by side and blocked the track and wouldn't let the guy pass. So that happened last year. They put some new rules in place this year. If they catch you doing it, there's some pretty harsh penalties for it. So you got to be kind of subtle if you're going to work together in that respect. At Daytona, you can do it with the draft. You obviously can, find a partner on the track and follow them around if you want to pit at the same time to kind of get out together that way. You just can't manipulate the whole total outcome of the race, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Now, I know we have a short amount of time with you here, so I just want to see, we're watching NASCAR on this Sunday. Which drivers should we be looking out for? Who do you think is going to take this thing home?
Right now, if you look at the betting odds, Kyle Larson is the favorite. He's never won the Daytona 500, so he's probably one of the best drivers in the field. And he races everything from sprint cars to Indy cars, to even on the NASCAR side, to even the dirt late models. I mean, he'll jump if it's got 4 wheels and a steering wheel, he'll race it. A lot of people
think the name of a winner. I mean, Kyle is
right, exactly
all a winning name.
There you go. That's right out front there. I think he's one to watch. Denny Hamlin's really good at Daytona. Some drivers have a knack for these high-speed tracks and to find those air pockets kind of thing, and how to work their way through the front, because the cars run so close together. It's so easy to crash. You'll see a big wreck. Every one of these races always seems to have one because they're so close together and going so fast. Somebody will make a mistake, and then you get swept up in a 15-car wreck, and you're part of it. He has a knack to get around those. He's always been around there at the finish. I think he's okay. Kyle Busch is probably another driver that has never won Daytona. Another Kyle, yeah. He probably should. I mean, he's come close so many times. He's probably due one. He may want to watch, but it's just a total crapshoot for the Daytona 500. All 40 cars have a shot to win this. You can, if you want to take a long shot bet and 1,000 to 1 guy, now's a chance to do it, because it could really happen. I mean, we've had some crazy winners the last couple of years.
Yeah, but Dirty Dick Trickle never won.
No, not Daytona. He won a lot of short track races, but never at Daytona.
Greatest NASCAR name of all time.
He's a Wisconsin legend.
Exactly. He was a favorite on Sports Center.
All
And
the
he's a
time.
really great
Yep.
guy. If you got to meet him, I hung out with him when he was around here a lot of times. He
That's
was a lot
awesome.
of fun. He was the guy that told me we were at after the slinger races and it was really late. And I told him I had to go home. It was late. And he asked me how many laps you're racing tomorrow. And I'm like, I'm not racing tomorrow. He's like, well, you need 1 hour of sleep for every 100 laps you run. You're not running any laps. You don't need any sleep. I'm like, okay,
There you go.
Dan,
me to
thank you
stay.
very much for
All right.
joining us today.
no problem.
We haven't had a chance to not talk NASCAR, but I'm sure we'll have you back again. So we will
100%.
talk to you soon.
And make sure,
Sounds-
Sports Talk with Dad fans, make sure you check out Dan's channel. Let's Talk NASCAR.
Yeah, it'll
Go
be
to
on
his
Sunday.
YouTube page.
Yep, Sunday morning at I'll be live at the track. I'm going to the race myself, so I'll be there Sunday morning at 10 o'clock Central. And when I come back, you want to do a recap? We can do that for here too. That'd be great.
100%. Definitely. We'll be listening in. Thanks, Dan, for
Thanks,
your time.
Dan.
Thanks.
You know, we have to have Dan back on because I have a lot of questions about NASCAR and crashes and all that fun stuff. But I have to ask, did you expect me to be a NASCAR driver with naming me Kyle?
No, I've seen you drive, and I don't want you on a track at all.
Hey, I am a good driver. It's everybody else on the road that is a bad driver.
Well, I'll tell you this much. I've been to Daytona during Speed Week.
Yeah.
I had to go over for appointments and whatever. It is a nightmare.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of people there.
And it's Florida drivers.
It's Florida drivers.
For all of our Florida fans, I don't even have to apologize because you know it's true. I tell you what, I became a much better driver in Florida because I was a very aggressive driver when I first got my license. Probably shouldn't have had my license for a long time. But you have to be defensive in Florida.
Yes.
You have to be. I mean, they average a fatality a day in Tampa from car accidents.
And there's so many more people that have moved to Tampa. I was down there last year.
Yeah.
I could not believe the traffic. It was like Tuesday or Wednesday night whenever I was there. No traffic should have been on the road.
Yeah.
And it was packed wall to wall, bumper to bumper. It was a nightmare. But going to Daytona, it is the dream of most race fans to go there and watch that.
Definitely.
I wanted to ask him about Mark Martin, who's my niece's Tammy.
Yes.
She used to have a tire in her living room.
Of
And
Mark Martin, yeah.
Yeah. And I made the mistake of flicking a pebble off of it one time.
Oh, how did that go?
You would have thought I had killed her dog.
Yeah.
Do you know where that pebble came from? I'm like, the road? I don't know.
Oh, you took the pebble off the tire?
Well, I flicked it off.
Wow.
It was
Really?
It was not a good.
That's like having somebody's cleats from the Super Bowl, like having Reggie White's cleats from the 96 Super Bowl and flicking off grass from it.
Yeah, it was a mistake.
Like, you don't do it.
I didn't repeat the mistake.
Oh, I bet.
She
I
was-
bet.
She was beyond angry.
And rightfully so. But we have to move on because we have other stuff to talk about. The Super Bowl obviously happened, and that was
Wow.
probably the most boring game I have seen in a
It
very
was
long
over
time.
by halftime.
It's amazing what happens when the refs have to not favor the Chiefs.
Well,
They tried. They
Yeah, I was gonna
tried
say.
early on.
they called it fair. There were calls going against both teams.
Okay.
There was a
False
make good.
start on the center for snapping the ball. I get where they were coming from. He moved the ball. He's supposed to have it set beforehand. Ticky-tack.
A lot of ticky tacks, but for the most part, and there was an offensive pass interference.
That was stupid.
which I'm like, he extended his arm. That's not interference.
Well, he didn't. He put his hand in front of his face, moved it away, and then extended on his shoulder, which is not offense. It got better.
But-
It was a blowout. It really, the Chiefs should have never been there. They were
But they
blown
got-
out by a much better team.
Oh, well, I think the Eagles would have beaten whoever they played. They were a complete team.
Do you
they-
think that the Ravens would have given them a fit and the Bills would have given them a fit? It would have been a much better game.
I'm not sure it would have. I mean, they were getting to Mahomes rushing forward.
Yep.
There was no blitzes.
No.
And they were and give Russ Landy credit on this one. He said what the Eagles had to do
Yeah.
in the passing game, and that's exactly what they did because Barkley was not that much of the game plan.
Kellen Moore looked at Barkley and said, listen, you're a decoy today. And it was the right decision to make.
Yes.
And I love the fact that A.J. Brown, after a really bad throw by Jalen Hurts, gets in Sirianni's face. And then a fumble happens like 3 plays later. He scores a touchdown, and now he's happy.
Yes.
It's as easy as that.
Well, that's what he does. But
He's a wide receiver. Tom Brady said it best. He's a wide receiver.
exactly. I
That's
mean,
what they do.
Brady had Randy Moss. He
Yeah.
gets it.
It's how it goes, man. You got to deal with the diva-ness of the receiver, and that's okay. He's one of the best in the league. My question to you is now, well, I have two questions for you.
Okay.
One, do the Chiefs, with the way they're set up now, even make the playoffs next year?
I think they're going to take, like I said about San Francisco last year, I think Kansas City is going to take several steps back.
Yeah.
I don't think they make the playoffs next year.
So you're counting them out of the playoffs altogether. Andy Reid's coming back next year.
Yeah, he is. He is. And he still have Mahomes, but they've got a lot of retooling. They've got to get a left tackle.
They do.
And their pieces.
And they need wide receivers.
Yes. I was going to say, their pieces at the skill positions just aren't what they need to have. So if they can replace that, fine. We won't know until after the draft. But as it stands now, I think that team was beaten. It's tired. Kelsey looked like this may be it for him.
Yeah.
He's 36 years old.
It's time.
It's time. And I don't. They've had a run like no other.
Yeah.
And they will be back in the playoffs and back in the Super Bowl in a couple years, I think. But the next 2 years are going to be tough.
I agree. What do you think about Philadelphia? Is this a start of the dynasty for the Eagles? Because that team is stacked.
It is.
They paid their quarterback. They paid their receiver. They've paid their running back.
And they've got guys like Jalen Carter who are still on his rookie deal.
Correct. Well, and that's the trick here, right? Because you have a lot of that defense is new.
Right.
They're
Cooper
on
Duran.
rookie deals. So at some point, they're going to have to pay them, and at some point, that team's going to start to fall apart because that's just how it works,
Yes.
right? You got to pay people, and you got to decide who's going to stay, who's going to go. How long do you think the Eagles can sustain this? Are they going to be back at it next year, or is this a really good team that had a really good run, but that's the blip?
Jalen Hurts proved a lot to me. He was so calm under pressure.
Yeah.
He talk about the eye of the tiger. He was
Yeah.
going to win that game.
Well, his screen, the background of his phone throughout the playoffs was that picture of him walking off the field as the Chiefs confetti fell out.
Exactly. And he was so cool after when he was doing the post-game interview, they asked him, how do you feel? And he goes, I'm still processing.
Yeah.
And which is great because that's just the way he is. He's a good guy.
And the cleanest cut goatee that I've ever seen in my entire life.
Take a lesson.
It looks like it's pasted on.
And take a lesson.
I enjoy the facial hair I have. Listen, I'm not fighting with anybody. I just try.
In answer to your question, I think the Eagles are the beginning of like a 3-year window where they can get back.
Yeah.
Now, it's going to be tough because I think other teams are going to retool, but the NFC is still the weaker of the two divisions.
No.
Yes. Look at the AFC West next year. That's why I'm saying they may not make the playoffs.
That's fair.
Just because of that division.
The Chiefs are going to have a hard time. I think the Raiders are still going to be not great next year. I
No,
think
but they're going to be better.
The Chargers are going to take a step forward, and the Broncos are a team ready to do something special here, especially if they add a couple of pieces.
Which I think they're going to.
I agree. The Bengals are going to be better next year as long as they can get an offensive line. I mean, Burrow arguably should have won the MVP, but you're not going to give it to a guy who didn't make the playoffs. You're just not going to do it. So let's change it here because I have a couple questions for you on some players that could be moving along next year.
Okay.
And I have my own opinions on this, but I want to know yours. And you and I, both Packer fans, obviously I'm wearing my Packer stuff this year. So Davante Adams will be released by the New York Jets. I mean, we just have to assume a trade's not going to happen. They're going to release him and have to eat that contract.
Well, and the reason they're releasing him because are going to release Aaron Rodgers.
Rumor is they're going to release Aaron Rodgers. That's the assumption here, which makes sense. Where do you see Davante Adams going next year?
I could see him going to San Francisco. I could see him. I don't think he'll go to Kansas City. I could see him with the Chargers. Absolutely. Everybody in Wisconsin is, of course, hoping for a reunion.
He's not coming back.
I don't think that's ever going to happen because I don't think the general manager would ever bring him back. Goody just doesn't do that kind of thing.
No, and I don't know what he'd bring. Well, I do. He'd bring a lot to the Packers.
Yes,
he would. But he's getting older now. Packers are pretty young. We need a veteran wide receiver. That needs to happen. The best fit, I think, for Davante Adams is the Denver Broncos. And if I'm Davante Adams, that's where I want to go. You have a young quarterback in Bo Nix, who, granted, sophomore season, right? Could have a sophomore slump. But you have Cortland Sutton on the other side that's going to take a lot of pressure off of you, and you can run those short routes. Another team that I think is an outstanding fit for Davante Adams is the Houston Texans.
I can see that. I still think the best fit, because of the coach, would be the Chargers.
What do you think about the Lions? Because he's going to get this big payout, right? So he's going to be being paid by the Jets next year is the assumption. Hear me out. Hold time out. Hear me out. He's going to be paid by the Jets next year if he's released, right? So he's going to sign someplace, probably for 1 year, on a decent contract. The Lions, what you have is you have Williamson that goes over the top. You have the slot guy in Amon-Ra St. Brown, which leaves a lot of space for Davante Adams to work.
He is a Packer. He would never go to the Lions. It will never happen.
This isn't going to the Bears or the Vikings, okay? This is going to the Lions.
I don't care. They're in the division. He's a Packer. Let's drop that.
If you have to make a bet on where he's going to play next year, you can only pick one team. Where is he going?
Chargers would be my pick. Or my second pick would be Denver.
One. I gave you one.
I know, and that's why I said the Chargers.
All right. I'm a toss-up between the Texans and the Broncos because I think him paired with C.J. Stroud, especially with Stephon Diggs kind of being up in the air, how he's going to be next year, I think that makes a lot of sense. My pick, by far, I think he's going to be a Bronco next year. I think that makes the most sense. All right, let's talk about another guy. Now, this is going to have to be a trade.
I want him to be a Packer.
I want him to be a Packer too, but do you really think that's going to happen, though?
No, I don't.
All you hear on Packers sports, whatever,
talk in Wisconsin
is Davante Adams coming back to the Green Bay Packers. I would love it. I've said it before. I never wanted to leave. I wanted him to break Don Hutson's record.
Right.
I wanted his number to be in the rafters, but it's not going to happen now. It's over. And so we have to move on. We need a veteran receiver,
which
for sure. We need a true number one.
And he's, 30 years old?
31, 32?
Okay. He hasn't slowed down, and he's always been durable.
He has.
So I think he's going to be a good pickup for wherever he goes.
But he's getting to that age. I can tell you as soon as I turn, and he's not there yet, but as soon as I turned 35, my body started to react different. And I'm not an athlete,
right,
who's getting his butt kicked week after week. He is.
He's in his final 3-year window.
He is. And I'm going to be honest with you here. And I'm wearing a Packers shirt, but I have to be honest here. I don't think the Packers are going to be very good next year. I really don't. With the team the way it's designed now, we have no number one receiver. We have no receivers. Let's be honest. Jaden Reed, I think, is a star that needs to be utilized more. I think we have a terrible coach.
You've made that clear.
Jordan Love, I think he has the capability again to be a Hall of Fame quarterback, but we just lost our quarterback coach. And he has nobody to throw to. And we're a run-first team because we don't have the weapons. I'm really nervous that the Packers could be one of those teams that doesn't make the playoffs. Because the last 2 years, we didn't. We were the 7th seed. The last 2 years, we did not make the playoffs.
This will be a make-or-break year. If the Packers don't take a big step forward,
LaFleur's gone.
He's got to be. And Jordan Love needs to be more like Jalen Hurts, where
he's got to move more.
He does his reads, but then he's got to be ready to run because he's got that skill.
That's the NFL today.
Yeah.
The best quarterbacks, they make their reads and then they run. You have the Joe Burrow that can sit in the pocket, but he's still moving. You need to be a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson. Aaron Rodgers in his prime.
Back in the day was always good for a 20-yard run at some point because he would pick his spots.
Correct. Or at least he was scrambling. I'm really nervous the Packers aren't going to be a good team next year. Deebo Samuel. Now, Deebo Samuel's going to have to be traded. He's coming into the last year of his non-voided years of his contract. And that contract at the end of the year is only a signing bonus of $8.9 million, and his salary is $1.3.
Yeah.
So the idea is you're going to have to re-sign him if you trade for him. But again, you have to trade for him, and I'm assuming the Niners are going to be requesting a good amount.
Yes, but if you're a team like the Broncos, you've got draft capital, you bring a guy like that over,
it opens up the playbook.
It certainly does.
I mean, we've seen what Sean Payton can do with somebody like a Taysom Hill and especially somebody like an Alvin Kamara. I think he could do a lot with him. But are they going to – well, never mind. I was going to say they're going to trade him within the division. They're in different conferences, Kyle.
And
pay attention.
And that's why I've heard a rumor about Washington Commanders. The 49ers aren't trading him within the NFC.
So where does he go?
There's I've done in researching this. I've 3 teams keep coming up, which is Denver,
Yep.
Houston,
Yep.
or Pittsburgh, which I don't see Pittsburgh doing.
Pittsburgh's another team where I think they're in trouble of having a real bad year next year.
Well, they're going with Justin Fields as their quarterback, so yes, they're going to have a bad year.
Justin Fields, I love you. Ignore him. Here's the thing: who's your best offensive weapon on Pittsburgh is George Pickens, who at best is a wide receiver too.
Right.
I mean, I always thought he'd become a wide receiver one, but he's just not. We have to accept what he is. You have Najee Harris, who I love Najee Harris, but by NFL standards, he's slow. He's still a fast human being, but by NFL standards, he's very slow. He's not as much of a power back. I don't understand the obsession with Najee Harris as your starter in Pittsburgh. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
That's all they've got.
It is, but they haven't done anything to bring another guy in. Like you think Najee Harris would be great as a 1-2 punch, with an Aaron Jones offsetting him or an Alshon Jenti coming in.
But the problem is they don't have a quarterback that really can get the ball to these guys.
Russell Wilson's not the answer. I think his career is done personally.
I
don't know who's going to bring him back. But let's go back to Deebo Samuel. He could make a big difference on Pittsburgh. I don't think it's enough for him to really make an impact there. Houston makes sense to me. Denver definitely makes sense to me. The Chargers make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, honestly, if I have to pick a team, if I'm Jim Harbaugh and I'm looking for one player, Deebo Samuel at 29 could make a big difference there. I could see him most at the Los Angeles Chargers.
Okay. All right. Well,
who's your team? You got to pick one.
I think Denver's going to make a run at him for the same reasons you think the Chargers will. He's younger. He's dynamic. They can do a lot with him, and he would be great for Bo Nix.
He would.
He would help him a lot.
All right. Myles Garrett has been the big story here.
He's not leaving
for a trade.
He's not leaving Cleveland. But we'll play the game a little bit.
Play the game.
Let's play the game.
I'm going to be honest with you. I agree with you. I completely agree. He's not leaving Cleveland. And my answer is going to be he's staying in Cleveland. That's the team he's going to be a part of next year.
I have heard one thing, though, that they re-sign him, they get him there, and if the Cleveland's not winning by midseason, they're one of that midseason trades.
Okay, but here's the problem, though. If you re-sign him, you're going to make him the highest paid player, defensive player, probably in the history of the NFL.
There would still be a bidding war no matter when he's up because he's the most dynamic edge rusher.
Depending how long that contract is, though.
It'll be 5 years.
But okay, but not only, here's the issue, though. If you sign him, not only are you taking on this new massive contract, but you're also having to give up multiple picks, if not players, for him.
I think it would be a combination of players and picks.
And so I can't see that happening. He's not being traded midseason. Not happening.
I still think if it's trade, that's when it would be.
If he doesn't have a contract yet, yes.
Okay. Getting back to the game that we've been playing here all over the place for weeks now, Myles Garrett's going to be traded. He's demanded a trade. Who's going to get him? I mean, it'd be good for any team in the league.
The Buffalo Bills are willing to pay for him. They're in a win now mode. They just have a newly named MVP in Josh Allen. That Von Miller is getting older now. I mean, he was that guy, right? They signed him to be their version of Myles Garrett, and they took a chance on him. And listen, he was impactful. He's more impactful than most defensive ends in the league. He got older, and it happens.
I think it was Ian Rappaport that put out a note on this and said there are 2 teams that should be in a bidding war to get Myles Garrett. One is Buffalo.
Yeah.
The other is Green Bay.
No.
I think he'd be great for Green Bay. He'd be ideal.
Well, he'd be great for any team. We've already established
We've established that, but he would finally solidify that defensive line, and he would give somebody they could put pressure on without having to blitz all the time.
He would be a talent we haven't seen on the defensive side of the ball since Reggie White.
Correct.
In Green Bay. He is that type of caliber of player.
He's a generational talent that you would love to have. That being said, Green Bay won't trade for him, and Cleveland's not going to trade him.
Cleveland is not going to trade him. I think Buffalo would be willing to give up a lot for him because I think it does solidify something that they really need. Because what did we just learn about the Chiefs, right? Who's been their dagger? The Kansas City Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
And you just saw how to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. You need to beat them with a 4-man rush with strong defensive linemen. Honestly, I think the Eagles, off tangent here, I'm going to Frenchie squirrel here for a second, but I think the Philadelphia Eagles just changed the way people build their teams. And it's a way, by the way, I've been saying to build your team forever. I'm taking credit for it. Go back, watch the other videos. But you need that front four that can get to the quarterback.
Yes.
You need it. And I don't think I'm saying anything out of the box.
I was going to say
it forever.
Everybody's saying that. If you can get there with 4, that leaves everybody else a chance to
right.
cover
But it's the big guys in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
The defensive lines have been getting smaller and smaller and smaller, especially with this 3-4 defense that's been big. You're seeing a lot more people go back to a 4-3 where you have the big guys in the middle that frees up the ends and also stuffs the run.
You've got to get an edge rusher. The next guy up that's been the big rumor of trade is, of course, Max Crosby.
Yes. Now, there's been a report that just came out. He and Josh Jacobs are very close.
They're very tight.
So if we're talking one guy that could actually come to the Green Bay Packers, that's what I could see that happening.
Which I would welcome Max Crosby with open arms. I'd love to have him. And it would make sense because he and Josh are tight. They've been talking. That being said,
he's from Michigan.
He is.
You're right across the bay.
That being said, they got Pete Carroll in Vegas now. He's a defensive coach, and players love him.
He's a defensive coach, but he's got a team to rebuild here.
Yes,
I mean, this is not a team. The Raiders are not a team that are going to win anytime soon. Now, they could surprise us. Don't get me wrong. Pete Carroll's a great coach who has done great things.
They don't have a quarterback.
But they don't have a quarterback.
Right.
And they don't have weapons. Like, their star offensive player now plays for another team. Like, they just let him walk.
They're in a their window
They're
doesn't
a bad
start.
Team.
Their window doesn't start for 3 years.
No. And Pete Carroll won't be a part of it.
No, he'll build it and get it back to where it should be.
And then he'll go up to the front office, and that'll be the end of it. Like, this is a bad team. It's going to stay a bad team. I've heard they're working their magic to try and trade up to get Shador, who I think is really the only first-round quarterback grade, in my opinion.
Well, we know Will Howard's not.
I never said he was a first-round pick.
I know.
I just said he's going to be a good NFL quarterback. That's all I've ever said about Will Howard.
Shador would be good.
Let's take out Green Bay. I think you and I both agree, if there's one place I could see Max Crosby out of all of these, it's Green Bay for him. That makes sense.
I think it's the only place he goes.
I agree. But okay, here's the question, though. The draft is in Green Bay this year. With the Packers, Mark Murphy's last year, okay? I need you to take the whole picture in, because the answer is obviously yes, of course you would. But it's the pageantry of the thing. Are you not going to make your first-round pick in Green Bay?
So here's the way you would do that. And this is for the Packers organization. Don't be stupid. If you can make a trade for Max Crosby by giving up your number 1 pick, which is like 23, give it up.
Yeah.
And then when it's your turn to come up to pick, you march Max Crosby out on stage, and there's your pageantry. This is what we've got. I'd rather have this than that pick. And now go ahead, Raiders, make your pick.
I 100% agree. Outside of Green Bay, where do you think Max Crosby could end up? Because I do not think he will be with the Raiders at the start of the season.
He's one of those guys, the Lions. He'd be another piece on that team.
From Michigan.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see him doing that.
I could see the Bills, again, if you're not going to get Garrett, he very much fills that need and would be a great fit on that
Crosby
team.
wants to win.
He does.
So it's got to go to one of the contenders. So Buffalo, Detroit, Kansas City, no.
And here's the thing. I think there is this inflated view on the Packers right now where they're a short way away. And I really don't think they are. It could be, but again, you have to have a good coach. And you have to have a coach that doesn't choke under pressure and that can actually change his game plan when it's not going well.
You know, people have watched this show. They all thought you loved Matt LaFleur. This is only about the 15th time in the last 3 weeks you've told everybody you don't like Matt LaFleur.
I know I've given the impression that I love Matt LaFleur.
No.
I know that I have, but I really don't think he's a good coach. I don't. He's proven it time and time again.
You know what he is? He's like Marty Schottenheimer.
Yeah.
He will get you to a certain point, but he can't win the big game.
Right.
He's been in the NFC Championship and gagged.
Dude, I just saw something on Marty Schottenheimer. Again, squirrel moment. Where right after the 14-2 season that they had, they lost in the first round. all of a sudden him and the GM got into this big fight and they fired him a month later.
Yeah.
It's like you just went 14-2.
Right.
And have a stacked team. LaDainian Tomlinson just broke every record you can imagine, and you just move on.
Marty was a guy, a lot of integrity, good coach, but like most NFL coaches, single-minded, and it was his way.
Well, and I think he had the same situation. He had the same effect, I think, that happened to McCarthy.
Yes.
That 2014 NFC Championship against Seattle broke him. And I think the losing on that fumble,
that was
instead of kneeling the ball, broke him.
It broke
and he
him.
never recovered from that Browns scenario. All right, Max Crosby, I think you and I both agree. Now, we need to talk quarterbacks here because there are going to be 2 quarterbacks on the move. Russell Wilson, I'm not including in this.
I think he's going to the NFL Network or ESPN. He'll be in the studio someplace.
I can't. You're not going to want him as a starter. I can see him as a backup for a rookie. Do what Kurt Warner did in the Giants there, but I don't see that happening. And hold that thought on that one because I have a tangent I haven't gone on yet. But let's go on to Kirk Cousins here. Kirk Cousins is obviously going to be released by the Atlanta Falcons. It's not a matter of if, but when. Where do you see him next year?
He could go to Vegas as a stopgap. I think if Seattle's going to go with Geno unless they draft somebody.
Are they?
I don't know. I mean, if Kirk Cousins would be a great fit there.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about Seattle.
The other place is Minnesota.
That's not going to happen. You don't go back. You just don't. It doesn't happen.
But this is the one situation. They parted on good terms. He could go to New York for the Giants.
Yeah.
He's not going to go to the Jets.
Could he?
No, I don't think so. I think Aaron Glenn's going to want to just clean house. He's not going to go and get a veteran again.
But we've seen time and time again that sitting a quarterback
is good.
Is a good idea.
Yes,
and if you're not going to go get a quarterback in this draft,
Kirk Cousins wasn't that good last year.
Well, dude, he ripped his Achilles in half.
I understand that. And he's got to have another year of healing, a year and a half, because he sat the second half of the season. I just think it will be a Vegas-type team that will go and grab him for a year or two to get him through.
See, if I have to pick one landing spot for Kirk Cousins, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I can see that.
Pittsburgh Steelers are not in a position. I'm nervous about the Steelers because they're in the same situation they were with Kenny Pickett, where they need a quarterback.
But there's nobody in
this
this draft.
Not a quarterback.
Right.
And so I've seen mock drafts where Jackson Dart goes to them in the first round. And I think he's a good quarterback. He's definitely not a first-round quarterback. But you're going to see some reaches this year. And I think Pittsburgh's going to be one of those teams. But I think Kirk Cousins is a perfect fit for Pittsburgh.
Except that they're re-signing Justin Fields.
They are. And you can run with Justin Fields for a year. That's fine.
They've got a lot of needs on that team. They're getting old fast.
I don't think they're a good team. And I said that earlier in the show.
Yeah.
I don't. I think they have a lot of problems there, but I think it makes sense for Kirk Cousins there.
Let's talk
That's
about
where I see
another
it.
quarterback. Aaron Rodgers.
Going to be released by the New York Jets.
I don't think he's going to retire. He's not going to go out. And he had a decent season last year, especially the second half.
Yeah, I got 2 teams, but I'm going to let you go first.
He could go to the Giants. He's right there in New York, possibly. San Francisco, because I don't think they're in love with Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
And because Brock Purdy is, let's face it, after this season, we know what his ceiling is. You're not going to sign him to a big long-term contract.
Yep.
You've been saying Minnesota forever and a day, and it's probably more likely now than ever.
I will do an entire show of victory lap.
I'm sure you will. San Francisco, for some reason, just is kind of there for me.
It almost happened a while ago.
Yeah, well, no, it almost happened.
In 2020.
Yeah, because they are. I think it's been pretty much confirmed that there was like 4 first-round picks.
4 first-round picks were offered to the Packers in the 2020 draft. It was 2020 or 2019. I can't remember off the top of my head.
It was
one of those drafts where they were offered 4 first-round picks for him.
Yeah.
And the Packers said no.
Because it was staying within the conference. I would have taken anytime you can get 4 first-round picks for somebody. I don't care how good he is.
I agree.
Go.
I agree.
But-
I'm with you, but it didn't happen. He won 2 MVPs with us,
Yeah.
and it worked out.
It worked out and it's fine. And San Francisco is his childhood team. I think it would make sense for him to go and finish off if San Francisco is going to move on from Brock Purdy.
Yep.
That's my.
I got two teams.
Okay.
One, Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah.
Makes so much sense. And it's made sense for a long time that would be the answer. He's going to be stronger next year. That leg's going to be better. And here's what Aaron Rodgers needs. Aaron Rodgers needs a strong offensive coordinator that is going to set the expectations. You are going to run my playbook, and is going to need people around him that can help him succeed.
Well, and Kevin O'Connell is that kind
Kevin
of
O'Connell is that kind of coach.
So is Kyle Shanahan.
Kyle Shanahan works. I like your San Francisco idea, but I do think they're going to stick with Brock Purdy. I don't know why. I just do. I'm not saying I disagree with you, but I just think that's what's going to happen. The other team I can see, and I brought it up on the last show, and I've had a week to think about it, is the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns have been a quarterback away for a long time. That's what Deshaun Watson was supposed to be.
Well, and
you're already drama-filled, so you might as well include Aaron Rodgers in the situation.
And if you're going to try to keep Myles Garrett, what better way to do it than bring in a Hall of Fame quarterback?
100%. You draft a quarterback, you got the number 2 overall pick, you get the quarterback you want, or you wait a year to see what's out there, and you go that route for the quarterback.
There's one quarterback in this draft. That's all I would say.
It's Shedeur Sanders.
Yes.
Cam Ward makes me very nervous. Here's my idea on quarterbacks in the first round. This is how I always think about it. I look at the year before that's quarterback filled, right? And I stack that quarterback against that draft class. You have to.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at the quarterbacks this year, which quarterbacks would still be considered first-round picks if this was last year's draft? And there is one. There is Shedeur Sanders would still be considered a first-round pick. Cam Ward would not. And that's why Cam Ward came back to college.
And he'll be picked in the first round.
He will be. He'll be a top 10 pick. He's a big guy. He has a chance, but I really think Shedeur is the answer, and I think he could easily go number 1 to the Tennessee Titans.
I do too.
But we'll see. That's another one. Could any of these quarterbacks go to the Titans?
They're not close.
I don't. They're not anywhere close.
They're not close.
So let's do a quick rundown, real quick. Just a quick rundown.
Right.
Let's see what you got. So what team are each of these players going to go to? Devontae Adams.
Chargers.
I think he's going to the Broncos. Deebo Samuel.
Broncos.
I think he's going to the Chargers. Myles Garrett.
He's going to stay in Cleveland.
I also think he's going to stay in Cleveland. Max Crosby.
Green Bay or nowhere else.
I think he's going to the Buffalo Bills. Aaron Rodgers.
San Francisco. I'm going to go out on that limb.
I'm sticking with Minnesota.
I know.
Cleveland's very close for me, but I think he's going to the Vikings. Kirk Cousins.
Cleveland or Minnesota?
Again, you have to pick one.
I've got two. I'm playing in my mind. No, I actually think he'll end up with the Giants. I think it's a good fit there.
I think he's going to end up in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
We'll see what happens. We're going to clip it and see how right we are. As always, we're probably very wrong, but we'll see where it ends up.
Well, you're
That's
wrong.
True. You are no longer wrong. You are the king. My apologies.
1 year.
1 year.
Just one.
You and I have had a great show, but as always, you cannot have a conversation with your father without your dad getting the last word, so it is all you.
So we had a change in president a couple weeks ago. I don't know if anybody noticed. And what have we had since? He's out making big moves. The guys on the other side are doing a lot of fighting. And here's my suggestion. When I was growing up, there was something called the loyal opposition. You didn't take to the streets because you didn't like the guy in the Oval Office. You actually tried to work with him as much as you could. My suggestion is for everybody in the country, relax. We've got 4 years. And if your guy didn't win this time, your guy may win the next time. But this is not worth all of this angst. Let the guy give it a shot. We tried it one way, it didn't work. We're trying it another way. Let's see if it works. But don't hate your neighbor just because they're on the other side of the political fence. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. People won't even go on dates with somebody if you like one side or the other. Come on, America, we're better than this. I had friends on all sides of the political aisle, and you know what we did when we disagreed? We went and had a beer. It's time to get back to that.
Good one.
Thanks.
I didn't know where that was going for a second.
You never do.
I know it makes me scared every single time. He doesn't tell me the last word, and so I have to sit here in fear as I pass it over to him. But it was God bless America.
Yes.
And thank you, as always, so much for watching. This has been Sports Talk with Dad. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.